Hi there everyone and welcome. I'm Zan from Fel and Fair, and on today's video about medieval and fantasy costume building, we are going to be talking about belts. So buckle up. Okay, I'm not going to do that. Anyway, welcome guys. As usual, if you appreciate this video, please like it. Please subscribe for more videos and comment if you have any questions or video suggestions. We love to see those in the comment section, or just tell us your opinion about medieval and fantasy belts. So, couple disclaimers here as usual. First of all, this is just my opinion based on years and years of experience working in this world, doing research, that sort of stuff. This is not any sort of specific reproduction, reenactment stuff, right? This is just my opinion if you're for general medieval and fantasy costume building. Number two is some of this stuff, some of these products I've been given, and so I just want to let you guys know that. But I don't think I'm biased, but just want to let you know some of the stuff I did get for free. So there's not going to be a ton of links or product, we're not going to be showing you where to get a lot of the stuff on this one. We'll have a couple in there for you, but for the most part, these are actually belts that I've made or that somebody on our team has made over the years, just based on whether it's stuff we've used, improvements we've made, or things we've seen either pictures of or other sort of products that we liked and we kind of did our own take on them. So, but there are products like these available on the market. So just look around, you can find, and hopefully this will kind of give you some of the vocabulary so you'll know when people talk about a double wrap or a single wrap or different type of buckles and stuff. You will know what they're talking about and have some resources to choose wisely. So first of all, what we're going to start off is a very, very simple type of belt, and that is a ring belt. Now, a ring belt is it's literally simple, and it looks very rustic, medieval, barbaric because it is so simple, right? It's literally a ring that, in order to close it, you run it around, run the rabbit through the hole, down, under, into, yeah, okay. So anyway, this is a ring belt. Now this one I got from Lycos Leather years ago. He actually helped us out on a film. So this is actually a pretty cool one. This is much more than kind of your simple introductory basic belt. I know when I started, it was just a brown strip of leather and a ring. It's the first medieval belt I ever had. Worked great, but that's kind of your basic introductory thing. Now the cool thing about this one is those folks put really awesome kind of Celtic knotwork tooling into the belt. So this is something that, and we'll talk about this later and we'll kind of note this as we go on. There's several different materials you can use for a belt. We're not going to talk about tablet weave belts, although those are really cool. They kind of, for me, fall more in the category of like sashes and stuff. It's more of a decorative thing, a little less functional, but depends on what you need the belt for, right? And it's entirely possible that a tablet weave belt can function fine. But for the most part, belts are going to be made out of leather. And the things that are going to differentiate with them is, like we talked about with the buckle, is the buckling system, the locking system, right? And then, whether it has a design or not. That is pretty important because, in my opinion, having the design that you choose says a lot about the character, says a lot about the design. So remember, you're keeping this in mind no matter if you are doing this for a LARP, for a cosplay, for some sort of medieval or fantasy film project or theater. So kind of depending on what your context is, the needs that you have may change a little bit. So anyway, all that to say, pluses and minuses of a ring belt. Pluses, very simple, usually inexpensive. The folks at Lycos Leather, they are more expensive, but they are really coolly tooled. The only downside, in my opinion, to their stuff is that they actually are so good at what they do that it almost looks machined. It almost looks like, somebody, like it doesn't look very barbaric, in my opinion. So once again, depending on what you're going for. This one we've worn a ton. We've used a lot. We've used it in almost any project we've done, which shows you how much I like it. So it has worn down and looks a little more rustic now, but when they sent it to us, it was very pristine. So the downsides of it is you can see as it tightens and there's force on it, it gets stronger, the knot gets stronger, but anytime there's slack, it gets looser, and then you run the risk of kind of having it come undone. So I really only like these for very simple purposes. So if you're doing a wedding or characters just sitting around kind of at home, if you're doing anything more athletic, if you're carrying any weight on them, if you are running around, I really like to have a belt with a buckle on it. So that is the downside of ring belts. Now when it comes to buckles, there are tons of options out there. There's plenty of belts that have kind of modernish, brash, it's not a, well, it is a word, but it's not the one I was looking for, brass buckles. Just like this one, it's very similar to what you would find on a modern belt. Now you have some cool stylized ones. Now this is a modern one I got from Tandy, but it's a cool Celtic knot sort of looking deal. The downside to this is, I mean, most people maybe not, but I see this and I think, oh, that's a modern belt buckle, right? It's just a little too perfect to be something that was, you know, cast in the Bronze Age or something, or in the Viking Age or the Vendel Age. This is a cool forged buckle that Charles Lionheart Ellis of Eagle Crest Forge forged for us, and it has a really cool kind of locking mechanism where it locks in like that, so stress has it there, and then you just can do a little loop-de-loop tie there as well. And then the other options you have, this is a very thin belt from Epic Armory. They've got the cool medieval style brass buckle on it. It's actually a pretty inexpensive belt. They come in 2 sizes. I really, really like these. I think I've probably bought 20 of these, and they've given me several more just because I like to throw them on everything. So we're going to get to that in a second. But the last type of buckle option that you have is one that I have right here, which is a sort of cast medieval brass looking buckle with it's called a chape down here on the thing on the tip of the belt. This is my favorite. I love these, but a lot of times these can be very expensive. And a lot of times, you know, this buckle probably costs more than this entire belt. So just things to think about when you're trying to prioritize your buckle type. Now, like I said, I really like to have for the most part, anything I've got a sword attached to, anything that I'm using for a combat event or for a character that's fighting, I like to have the standard type buckle with little you know, holes in the belt. Suddenly I can't remember what those holes in a belt are called that you put the. Oh well, we'll get back to that, folks. Anyway, so you know, just another option that I have actually is this is a forged steel belt. So that's the forged steel buckle rather. So I made this one. That's why it looks terrible. But you know what? I figured a Viking, in his rustic lack of knowledge in primitive materials, probably could have made something like this. So that's about the extent of my blacksmithing skills, is what somebody with some fire and rocks could do. So yeah. Now when it comes to, there's 2 other things to talk about when it comes to belts. One is design of belts, and one is kind of the designs on the belts, or the patterns, that sort of stuff. So let's talk about patterns and stuff. I am a big fan of things like Celtic knot patterns. If you've got anything Celtic, Viking, anything like that. If you don't have something like that, but you still want to have some patterning, medieval or whatever, this something a little less fluid and natural looking, something like this crosshatch works really well. Here I've got just a little design. It's a little leaf design. It's just a one-off. It's not a pattern. This one is actually kind of based on like a more dwarven style. So this is actually the first belt I ever made, still hanging in there. So it's kind of a dwarven style patterning. And this one right here, just there's no patterning at all. Just the stain kind of gives it some nice character. And so, you know, that's a choice you can make. The nice thing about patterning is it gives depth. It gives that sort of additional perspective and just more little details that add character to your character. So something else to discuss when you're talking about belts is what is their purpose, and kind of you know, what are you going to be doing in those belts. So most people, when they're thinking of medieval belts, they're thinking of sword belts, and there's a couple ways to do that. First of all, there's a single wrap belt. So that's a belt that goes around just one time, and you hang your sword from it. Now, you can hang your sword in a couple different ways. There's things called frogs. So this is a frog. This is another one right here. This is a axe ring or axe loop or axe frog. So this just slides onto a belt and then hangs at your side, right? Pluses of this is it's very easy. It can go on any belt, and you can kind of adjust where it is. The downside is it does like to move around. It doesn't really just stay in one spot. So a single wrap belt just goes around you one time. Put that frog on there, you're good to go. Now here is it's still a single wrap belt, but it actually has kind of an integrated frog system where it has 2 loops that go around this scabbard, and it still goes around once, but it's actually 2 different separate pieces, so it's not actually a belt that's connected. So pluses of this is it kind of cants your sword this way a little bit, which makes it a little easier to run. It draws your sword in tight towards your body, so it's not flapping around like that. Downside is you don't have quite that flexibility. This is only for somebody who's right-handed and is carrying their sword on their left side, and it can only be used as a sword belt, right? So if you take the sword off, like, you can't still have a belt. You've got to have a second belt. So that's something to think about. Now there are double wrap belts. So this is one. So this has the frog integrated into the belt. So this one you could still wear theoretically without the sword in it or the scabbard in it, and it just basically wraps around twice and you buckle it. Now the advantage of this is while the sword is pulling the weight down on this side, the other loop of the belt that is around your body. One day we're going to have a more technologically advanced filming system, and we'll actually show you this on a person, but right now you're going to kind of have to get it from this illustration. Anywho, as the weight is pulling down with the sword there, the upper loop kind of cinches more around your waist and over on top of your hips, so it keeps the sword from sliding down. Now the downside is that sword is going to flap a little more as opposed to a single wrap sword belt. This is a combination that I really like. This is a double wrap sword belt, so it's but the belt itself is not actually integrated. It's actually just run through this loop on the scabbard. And it does a very good job of wrapping around, cinching at your waist, but then also keeping that sword in pretty tight to your hip. It also gives the sword a little bit of a cant, so especially if this is a pretty long sword for somebody to be wearing at their waist, it just makes it a little easier to walk around with. So something else to think about when you have belts is, these aren't just sword belts. So a lot of times you have something that's just keeping your tunic or your garments just kind of together, right? Or maybe you're just holding up a pouch or a knife. So sometimes, you'll have a smaller belt, something like this. You don't need that big, thick, heavy belt. So something like this is a great option. And you'll see in a lot of the costumes that I either do in film or that I wear, you'll see a lot of times I'm wearing 3 different belts. Maybe one's for a quiver, one's for a knife and pouch and that sort of stuff, and then one's a sword belt. The great thing about that is instead of having to take off your sword thing, unstring the frog, or take out the whip, whatever, you just take off the whole thing, set it aside, your pants don't fall down, your tunic doesn't fall down, you've still got another belt on there. So I love having that multiple belt thing. I also think it just looks really cool. So there's also some stylistic choice there as well. So a lot of times you'll see me wearing 2 to 3, I don't think I've ever worn 4 belts. Maybe I've worn 3 belts and a sash when I'm feeling, really libertine. But anyway, so that's all stuff to think about. Now, the final and kind of one of my favorite ways to carry a sword on a sword belt, and this, when it comes to actual medieval stuff, there's not a ton of historical precedent. We actually got this idea from the Lord of the Rings, some of the ranger outfits. But this is a sword belt with an integrated sword frog, so I can either have a sword on here or not. But there's actually a loop that attaches. Now, this is like the Mark I model. This is the very first one ever made. We've refined these a lot since then. But the cool thing about it is it actually slips over your shoulder and then goes around the waist. So the weight of the sword is actually borne by your shoulder, not by your waist, which is great. It's easier to carry some stuff sometimes there on your shoulder. It also kind of stabilizes the whole thing a little bit, keeps it from twisting and turning quite as much, and it keeps that belt from dragging down. So I really love this option, but like I said, it's not as historical. But if you're doing a fantasy piece, something like that, what you want to avoid if you're doing medieval or fantasy stuff is having that like World War I Sam Brown looking belt. You don't want it to look modern industrial age, right? So you got to still have it be rugged and gnarly and that sort of stuff. So the other thing is you can integrate things like pouches and stuff on the actual shoulder belt. But like I could actually unbuckle the sword belt or the waist belt here and just carry the whole thing. It'd be ridiculous, but this shoulder would bear the weight of the sword and everything. Now the last option is to actually have a purely shoulder belt. So you see this on a lot of Viking swords. I like it a lot if I'm riding a horse. having a shoulder belt rather than a waist belt, because then if I have a waist belt, a lot of times the scabbard's flapping, spanking the horse basically. But if it's straight up and down, it's just kind of hitting my leg. So that's another good option, but it's something you have to play around with. The whole thing with all of this stuff when you're choosing a belt, as long as it looks good for your context, and if you want a video about choosing the right thing for your context and that sort of stuff, we'll put a link to our main video, costume design video, down there in the description. But remember, like, you want a belt that serves your purpose, so that looks like it belongs in the realm, the world, the historical time period that you're using, and one that actually functions for the purpose that you're trying to have it function for. So, like I said, I'm a big fan of multiple belts. Just a great way to a very great and natural way. In the same way that, like, wearing multiple belts is kind of like having multiple pockets, where if you don't have a pocket, then you're like kind of like a woman wearing a dress that has a purse and everything's in that purse, and she has to either take everything or leave everything. Well, the great thing about having multiple belts is it's kind of like having pockets, or having a backpack and a purse and pockets. So I can leave some things, I can take some things. It's easy on and off process. You don't have to do the whole, let me set this, take out what I need, leave this, let me change. So just something to think about. Big fan of multiple belts. Well, thank you everyone. Thank you for watching. Like I said, please like, comment, subscribe, share this video, and check back for new videos in the future. Thanks a lot. Have a good day.